But my belief is that as the work that me and my team are doing, and regression therapists do, to heal emotional states, the client's energy field calms right down. And then, they're more open to listen to being in the moment. They're even more open just to learning to meditate, which is a great beginning. But ultimately, it makes it easier to be in that now moment for longer periods of time without a reaction or something pulling them away from it.
Welcome to the Consciousness of the Way. I am your humble servant and seafood Taoist Master San Qing, and I've got an incredible guest here today. I've been really looking forward to this conversation. I want to welcome to the podcast Steve Burgess, who is a hypno OG and has been helping people recreate their definition of reality for many decades. An author, an experiencer, and just a really amazing person. I enjoyed spending a few seconds with him before this podcast. I want to welcome you to the podcast, my dear friend.
Thank you, Sanchin. It's a real pleasure to be here.
Yeah. It's a conversation that I always welcome, and I would love you to give people a little insight as to how you got to this point.
Okay, I became a hypnotherapist about 32 years ago, 32 and a half years ago. My sort of spiritual journey was running alongside, really, that I was a practicing Buddhist for many years, mainly involved with Tibetan Buddhism. Well, until I fell out with Tibetan Buddhism, I felt it was just too damn religious and, too much into almost worship of deities and stuff. So that just didn't suit me. So I still remain with a sort of a Buddhist outlook on life to some degree, but not just the solely Tibetan outlook. I then moved into Native American shamanism, and then did some training in Native American shamanism because that was calling me. But in recent years, my sort of main spiritual path, if I have one, has been really non-duality and just working within that non-duality spectrum as best I can. And occasionally that comes into my work as well with clients and it's very strange how 30 years ago I didn't understand what non-duality is. Maybe even now I don't understand it, but then I didn't. But nowadays quite a lot of clients in their therapy sessions are actually coming to a sort of a non-dual perspective in their understanding of who they are and where they are in the universe. From a hypnotherapist perspective, I started out as a normal hypnotherapist, if there is such a thing. I was just using what we call post-hypnotic suggestion therapy, which was just about taking people into trance, guiding them into trance, and then giving the subconscious mind suggestions to help them to change, to help them to lose weight, to stop smoking, to become more relaxed, etc., let go of phobias. And I was doing sort of okay with that, but my real journey as a therapist began when, after about 6 months of being a therapist, maybe 9 months, a young fella came to me with a severe anxiety state, and this was severe. He was about 24 years old. Excuse me. He was about 24 years old. He sat in front of me in my chair, in my office, and he was, in English, we would say he's a bag of nerves. So he sat shaking, he was breathing quickly, he was hyperventilating, his eyes were darting all over the place, and he was just a very anxious person. So I said to him, so how long have you had this anxiety for? And he said, well, I've had it all my life. I've always been a worrier. But as I've got older and when the children came along, I've just been like this for a long time. He said, I can't work anymore. I had to give my job up. I sit at home all day shaking. I'm on medication, which hasn't helped in any way. In fact, most of it's made it worse. I can't involve myself with the family, and my wife is sick of it. And she said, if I don't get it sorted, then she's going to leave me. She can't take much more of this. So I said, has anything caused this? Have there been any major traumas in your life? And he said, nothing. Okay. So I guided him into trance. I thought, we'll just see where we need to go. We'll ask his subconscious where we need to go. And I was expecting just a standard sort of gentle therapy session where he would just go into a relaxed state and I would read some positive suggestions to him from one of my scripts about how he can let go of the anxiety and he can feel more relaxed now, etc., etc. And he very quickly went into a very deep trance. I mean, within minutes, he was just laid in my reclining chair. He was breathing deeply. His whole body was slumped. And he was just in deep trance. And I thought, brilliant. Probably going to get a good result with this one. And then after about 10 minutes, all of a sudden, now I'm going to downplay what he did because obviously we're on the speakers, etc., and I'm in my office. But all of a sudden, as he laid in the chair, his body started to shake. His hands started to shake. His body started to shake. He started to move around. His breathing came quickly. And he suddenly started to speak in a whisper, in a loud whisper. And he's saying, no, they're coming. No, hide them, hide in here. Come in here, hide the children, hide, be quiet. Shh. And I'm sitting there with my script thinking, and then all of a sudden he started to scream and yell and writhe, and he is screaming, no, not the children, no, ah! And he just laid in my chair, completely quiet, totally calm. My heart was thumping. I said, how do you feel? He said, I feel wonderful. I feel absolutely wonderful. He said, I just feel so calm. I thought, I don't. But tell me about what you were experiencing. He said, well, it was weird. It was as if I was in another body, in another time. I was a man and soldiers were coming to try and we were hiding, me and my family, my wife and children, and soldiers, Nazis were coming to find us, and they burst into where we were hiding and they shot us all. He said, what on earth was that about? So I said, well, you've been in a past life. I mean, I knew about past lives. I hadn't trained in them as a therapist, but I knew about them, of course. And so I said, but how do you feel? He said, I have never felt this calm in the whole of my life. I am completely relaxed. So we just did some more gentle relaxation work. I brought him out of trance and his issue was completely cured. 10 minutes, he was completely cured. And I thought, why don't I know about this? Because this is obviously very significant. Obviously, I knew about past life and past life regression, but in the UK at that time, this was 1992, very few people did it or trained in it. So he went, sorry.
Woo-woo.
Well, to some degree, I mean, even nowadays, unfortunately, some people still believe it is woo-woo. But having said that, the growth in awakening has been extraordinary over the past 20 years, especially. But anyway, got information from the American Past Life Association, started playing with it, working with it. And then over the years, I've developed a regression system, which I train therapists around the world to use. And the whole regression system is about releasing, in most cases, the traumas from the past that are causing the problems in the present, in life now. And the regression model, all of our issues as human beings come from locked in feelings and emotions from past traumas. All of our issues. And those past traumas take place in any one or more of three areas: in this present life, in past lives, and in our ancestors' lives. So with some clients, we're just working in past lives. For in others, we're working in this life, past lives, and ancestral trauma to release the trauma, release the energy that is causing the issue. And then the issue gets better. It's very simple. And it's extraordinarily powerful. And as you said, it's very fast. People going to see their analyst in the States for years. Well, regression therapists like myself, we fall over laughing when we hear that. I mean, it's ludicrous. There is no need to do that in most cases. Not everybody can regress, but if you can see a good regression therapist who knows what they're doing, you can, that years and years of therapy go out the window.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree with you wholeheartedly. It's within Taoism, we call it, Shen projection, soul retrieval, and then revealing, past life reading. Personally, I always give people 9 lives leading up to this one, and it fills in all the gaps for them. And it's a visceral kinesthetic fit. It's an experience. So in most cases, I don't know what the mission of your clients is, but whenever I do this with someone for healing and remembering, returning to who they are, which is really the present moment, that is like a 3D, like movie playing in what someone would perceive as their third eye. I've had 1 or 2 people over 30 years that have their eyes open and they're experiencing it, but that's more of an advanced sort of like a clear sense that everyone could develop. I've yet to come across anyone that can't. I feel like, if you're a human being, you have 5 senses and a nervous system, you're off to the races. Whereas I've never sort of applied any of these sort of like metaphysical masteries on aliens. But it seems to be popular right now. It's definitely a part.
I mean, funnily enough, as you say that, so what I have been finding in my team, I have a small team of therapists who I've trained, who are my team. I refer clients to them because I'm so busy usually. And we've been finding in the last year, more and more of our clients in hypnosis, in trance, in a regression session, are actually going back into a past life on another planet or in another star system as an extraterrestrial, you could say. And it's quite remarkable how often it is happening. It's quite extraordinary.
Isn't that interesting? Like 30 years ago when I started this stuff, most people would come to me with a psychotic episode with fears of being admitted to a ward with a padded room and a straitjacket. And from my lineage as a Taoist priest and two ordained in 2 lineages of Taoism, one of the things that I perform is exorcisms. Been doing it for decades. Now, in those days, that was a big feat. Today, that same person would probably not even end up on my doorstep because they would have an awakening, channel the Palladians, open a YouTube channel and get 100,000 followers. It's kind of like watching that progression. Now, this is a very interesting, I mean, through your own admission, just experiencing that client's physical response to that very regression or that awakening, however you want to perceive it, is really something else, because I mean, that's what you witness. I witness all the time when I perform exorcisms, which is completely exhuming this entity, which I will preface that this all has to do with the individuals, the experiences seeking and how they manifest what it is that they're experiencing in their reality. So be careful what you wish for, is how I put it. If you call out and you believe you want to put a thought, feeling, and emotion, which is a secret source of your reality, into effect, and you start playing with, and I have these all the time where people want to be the badass exorcist. I get students coming to me all the time. This can be problematic if you have any sort of subjective deficiency in your emotional state, and fear is being peddled. Fear is a gateway to emotions are a gateway to suggestibility. But what are your thoughts on that?
Well, there's a few things, and I mean, we exorcisms for me are at one end of the spectrum. We do see quite a few clients who have what we call spirit attachments. So these, for me, an exorcism is where there's a spirit which is quite malevolent, and we don't get many of those. Very rarely do we get malevolent spirits. Most of the spirits that are attached to clients appear to be very lost and helpless. And we then go through a sort of a protocol to send the spirit home. In fact, this afternoon I had a client in Stavanger in Norway, a young man who has quite a severe anxiety state. And using my regression system, he went back into his early childhood, and his body was releasing kinesthetically. Again, it was moving and there was jerking and emotions were coming through. But there were no sort of significant events in childhood causing this. So I'm tuning in as best I can, and my intuition just wondered, is there something here is this something like a spirit attachment? And I use a technique where the subconscious takes control of a finger. So the client doesn't have to verbalize. The subconscious mind just says yes. If it's a yes, the finger will move. And we found that he'd had a spirit attached to him since he was about 1 year old. And it had been with him all his life. And of course, this means that all through his life, he's had an anxiety state. Now, this spirit wasn't malevolent. It was just lost and stuck. It was scared, maybe scared to move on when it passed over and should have moved on fully, and it didn't. So I did a session where I sent the spirit home. It moved away, and he felt totally calm afterwards, absolutely calm. So that for me is my angle and the way I tend to work with spirit release. If occasionally, I think in 32 years, I've had one spirit which was really just too unpleasant for me. And I just recommended that the person saw somebody who specialized in that type of work. But usually they're just lost. And of course, the clients are picking up on their energies, and therefore they can affect the clients.
It is. It's like it's a fire sale. You know, I can go 10 years without seeing a single one. That's why I brought you to that alien thing, because for decades that wasn't the case. I'd see a benign sort of like a alien presence in someone's aura.
Mm-hmm.
And now it's like it's a fire sale. Everyone's got some alien connection. And so the second I do what my definition of a psychic drive-by psychic reading, which is give someone their mental, emotional, and physical state inside of 30 seconds, and you've never met them before, and they go, "What the is that? Whoa! What? Hang on! Whoa! How can you acquire this information?"
Mm-hmm.
Well, for me, this sort of energetic potential is just reading the aura, and every energy center has an emotion and a virtue, and it's either excess or deficient. And from that, I can very quickly build an outline of your mental emotional state, and I don't have to know you. And that's where people get freaked out. And that's why I always start with you want a reading? And they're like, "Sure, Magic Man, you want a reading? Sure, go ahead." And I always preface with that, even though I can see in some cases some people have real parameter, like they have boundary issues. So I always start at the bottom. And for a Taoist, it's nine energy centers, what we call dantians, basically energy field, the elixir. And so I'll start with what someone might consider a transpersonal point, and from the earth to the first, what someone would call a chakra, the root chakra, which gives you a very clear indication of where someone is on their sort of state of boundaries or lack of, or where they're at in their center point. And so then you get to the sexual energy, and they go, whoa, hey, this stuff is real. I'm like, yeah, but I'm reading it off the menu. I'm not invested in whether you tell me I'm the next coming of Jesus, or, all the angels are coming in and we're going to sing Kumbaya and I get in the lotus position and burn some incense. Yeah. This is just the reality, just like you and I having this charge right now. It's tangible. It's real. And I think what's really important is this, what you're mastering and sharing with the world, and how you're able to deliver it in a system, because I call Taoist alchemy a method, a system. You need a method to decipher what it is that you're doing. Everyone goes, I kind of just feel stuff and everything's good and everything's grand, and you don't need all this spiritual mumbo jumbo stuff and all this kind of stuff. I agree with you if that's how you perceive your reality. Without a method, You can sit here and play with energy. And I always tell people, it's like, okay, the quickest way to determine where you're at in your reality is to ask you one question. I'll be like, well, what is that? How do you feel at the end of your day? Well, I'm exhausted. Well, okay, let's start there, because that's fundamentally where you're tapping into your own life force, your source of energy, and you're not able to embody what we perceive it within Taoism as Wu Wei, effortless action, effortless effort, which is the flow. That flow state is derived from what we call the Wu Ji, which is the mother, which is what we call the center point between the breath in and the breath out, yin and yang. And so we remove ourselves from the polarizing effect of duality. As you put it, non-centrist, non-duality is what you're speaking of. And that's when the secret source starts to show itself.
It's interesting for me, is, you know, I like listening to other practitioners of other traditions and other systems, and you know, my practice is quite different to yours in a way, in that I aim to stay out of the system. I try to stay out as much as possible. Yes, my intuition is in there, but my belief, if you like, is that the client's subconscious knows best, and it's almost as if the subconscious is like the client's higher self, you could say, and it knows best. And if we're able to tap into that, we can use the innate wisdom of the subconscious to do the work and to get the client better, which means that I then can just be a facilitator. And that's my sort of role. And it's interesting, your role is, okay, you're more in there and using your skills in those ways to sort of bring stuff out. And so it's always interesting to me, because I prefer to stay out and be an observer and a facilitator rather than be actually too involved.
Well, yeah, I agree with you in that sense. If I take you deeper into that method, it's about the alchemy. So you have to realize where it is that you are in your barometer of, this is a tuning fork, a barometer to realize what is this, what do you call it? Spiritual consciousness? What are we talking about? What exactly is this journey that this person is on, if any at all? At a certain point, maybe they're having issues just with life itself, which, generally speaking, from a Taoist seeker perspective, the entry level, the ground level, is the first thing you identify is your emotions don't control you, you control your emotions. This is now a byproduct of your reality within a dualistic perception. So you start laying the foundation so that people can sort of decipher their own journey and realize that the distraction is that emotional content. And the more and more you return to the mother, the more and more this emotional content aligns itself. And so in essence, it sort of goes in the same path as what you speak of, which is stepping away. I'm not big on whether mommy, took 3 cookies from you when you were 5 and you've got a trauma about it. That's an energetic potential that can be basically dissolved in seconds for the practitioner, for the seeker. Once you give them the tools of how to, then they have the ability to basically become the master keeper creator of their reality with those tools. But the energetic potential, to me, why Taoist alchemy is still sought after to this present day, is the ability to separate electric from magnetic and transfer what is perceived within this reality and transmute it into something that is verifiable, self-evident. And that experiential moment, the experience, is only for you. It's not for me. My truth is not your truth. And the only truth, the only absolute truth, is your truth. And how that is derived, how that is created, is for you, the seeker. To go from the seeker, as I put it, I go, if you're thinking, you're not knowing. If you're knowing, you're feeling. Once you feel it, it's more than a feeling. That turns into a verifiable, tangible expansion. And one of my dear friends, Hans, he calls it, well, I'm contracting or expanding. Now, that contraction or expansion is variable and can be subjective until otherwise noted, because you only know what you know, you don't know what you don't know. So in that path of realization is the mastery that someone acquires from finding you, because their, as you put it, their higher self has gone, hey, if you go over this way, the resonance of this particular being, i.e. Steve, is going to give you all the secret sauce you need to your own realization of what your truth is. And so I agree with you wholeheartedly in that sense. There's always some type of level of method of realization, whether it's a out-of-body experience, a supernatural, paranormal, intuitive, a near-death, whatever it is, there is something that makes you realize that there's a veil of and a separation that has taken place here for you to return to that wholeness, that what some physicists would call the singular. I'm a little problematic about some of these terminologies these scientists use. They kind of tend to separate you using conscious agency and other things of this nature, where you understand the power of words. So from any Jesus students or disciples of mine, I make it very clear to you, a ground level stuff of linguistics is a great way to enter into and understand someone's mental, emotional state in seconds. Just listen to what they're saying. Just stand back and listen, and how they're creating their verbiage will give you a clear indicator of where they're at in their own reality. And then that's an entry level to up it. And so for anyone that doesn't understand what Steve was talking about with the finger moving, it's what they call an ideomotor response, or i.e. ideograms, that you can create very clear path between you and the unconscious to get messaging and create your own language of your own reality that is now this present moment. And so a lot of my friends, they're seasoned remote viewers. I love teaching people remote viewing, but ideograms are a great funnel of conditioned information that can be verifiable and repeatable for their experience. And so it's that is the most powerful. And people don't realize how quickly you can show you're having a dialogue, and it's instantaneous. It's like, okay, the dialogue is here. You ask a question, it answers the question immediately. And I'm sure it never gets old for you seeing that.
Yeah. And the beautiful thing is it takes, there's no middleman then. It's just the subconscious knows best. The higher self knows best. The client's awareness, if you want to call it that, knows best. And many people are just surprised at how easy it can be, and how intelligent, if you want to use the word intelligent, the subconscious, the higher self can be. My sort of experience is that it as though the subconscious knows everything anyway. And the conscious mind sort of gets in the way, blocks things, but the subconscious knows everything. So if we can ask the subconscious, then ask it, and it will give us the guidance. I also sort of think often, I was talking, like saying about non-duality and et cetera, and this sort of experience of oneness that we know just is. Then and it's easy to be in oneness. My experience, it's difficult to stay in oneness. And what I mean by that is that if a client has got a lot of emotional baggage, then their energy field is all over the place. The mind is all over the place. They're anxious, they're depressed, or whatever else. And to try to get that person into a state of oneness and just being in this now moment, it's not stable. They can do it for moments, but then it shoots off and they're back to whatever. So what I believe is that by doing the emotional release stuff, by releasing the locked in emotions that are causing issues, then the person becomes less reactive. So for most of us throughout our lives, we're reacting like this a lot of the time. Well, people who are living in drama all the time, or have psychosis, or are just very reactive up and down individuals. It makes it very difficult to live and be in a balanced state for any length of time. And so for me, helping clients to release their emotional stuff, that are these negative energies, well, they're not negative, but the energies that are causing the issues, they stop doing that and they start to live life like that. So they become less reactive. I mean, we know the ultimate is to live life like that, But for most of us, we get the blips along the way, of course. But my belief is that as the work that me and my team are doing, and regression therapists do, to heal emotional states, the client's energy field calms right down. And then, they're more open to listen to being in the moment. They're even more open just to learning to meditate, which is a great beginning. But ultimately, it makes it easier to be in that now moment for longer periods of time without a reaction or something pulling them away from it. And I listened to Rupert Spira, the great English non-duality teacher over here. He calls his path the direct path. And he's very much into just be with the now. But he also acknowledges that if a person has got a lot of stuff coming up, it makes it hard to be in that now for long periods of time. Go and see a therapist, and then it's easier to be in the now. So that's my sort of process, if you like, from a therapeutic and a non-dual process.
Yeah, I think it's amazing because, these are the things that are really, but I will go back to, it's a method. People need to understand how to acquire this mastery through their own cultivational practices, because there is a level of what we perceive. This whole reality is hinged on light to wave to matter to particle, realized from your attention intention, forming what you call variables of energetic potential that start with the attention intention, transmute the light to energy, creating a vibration. A vibration then has a frequency. A frequency, as you put it just a few moments ago, is that resonance. Can you hold that resonance? And that's the part where most seekers are deficient in holding that resonance. They have a brief, what we call the spiritual dragon. They're chasing that spiritual dragon. They get a taste of it. Grandma talked to them in their dreams, had a vivid realization. They saw apparitions, their energies, they're speaking to themselves. They're having this echoing effect. They have the ability to foresee the future. All these glimpses of paranormal, supernatural stuff that truly is just part of who they are, yet they want to get more of it. I got a taste, but now how do I acquire that repeatable experience? And that's where I think, Taoist alchemy is so powerful, because it's very, 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 very clear the path of alchemizing that and making it possible for anybody to acquire those states. And, they seem sort of surreal for many, but it always starts with the emotions, right?
Yeah. And I sorry to bring it, but I love the word. I never thought of it in those terms, San Qing. Alchemy. The process of therapy is an alchemical process. I've never thought of it in those terms before in all those years. So thank you for that.
Yeah. I mean, you could use it in the form of just that the electromagnetic spectrum piercing what you call the self-receptors on the dermal layer of your physical body, entering into the pineal, thalamus, and pituitary, creating the alchemical fun factory that is the culture medium. That's the messenger that switches on and off the gene expression, that is the wonderment that commandeers this physical flesh. That's the mastery of a Taoist, is to create and embody immortality, realizing that the longer you're able to saturate the 50 trillion cells that has the potential of 0.07 millivolts of electricity, is being commandeered. You are the maestro. And then it's a repeatable experience, right? So now you're able to really change things, reset yourself, share people the resonance and transmit it. And in some cases, a dear friend of mine, Gareth, would call it, through his own yogi experiences, the Brahman ability to transmute a frequency. I just, for me, I channeled my teacher Lao Tzu over 30 years ago, and he's still my teacher to this day. I see him and hear him as clear as I do you. And I'm not 3 cents short of a dollar, as Crockett would say from, the 1980s wonder TV show, Miami Vice. He left his groceries at the meat market. He said short of a dollar. I'm very, very conscious, very coherent, and and able to show people their ability, their potential.
Mm-hmm.
And that really comes from that energetic potential, even though it surpasses the electromagnetic spectrum. But there's an entry level. There's an alchemical processes that takes place for it to be verified by you, not having a dialogue with, something that until it's realized for the user, the seeker, it's nothing more than potential fleeting moments of delusion. So there has to be something that's put down as a framework, as a template. And then when you use that template, you realize what is possible, which is absolutely anything. And you see crazy stuff. I mean, I've seen some crazy stuff over 30 years, you name it, I've seen it. And it's about that resonance, that ability to maintain it and hold it. So when I transmit Lao Tzu's presence, it's a visceral kinesthetic experience where you feel like you're heating up in a sauna. You could take out your stick in a marshmallow and use the transmission of my admission of whatever's coming into this space, whether it's a digital offering or in person. You're going to know there's something out of the ordinary going on here, and it's crazy. And that's basically puts the mind out of it, because you're like, hang on, whoa. I don't have to hear, I don't even have to know what this guy's saying. I'm feeling it, and it makes sense to me. And I would say to someone that uses, I think with my head, I feel with my heart, I get a gut reaction. These are all potential languages that people use, yet they have to understand when you create the energetic fluidity, the flow, as we put it, the flow state, where, you were speaking of things going up and down, and now we just move through that flow state, which we call Wu Wei within Taoism, then you can hold that resonance. There's a change. Like if I do it with the most people I've ever had in one group healing is 1,000 people in person, and online, I mean, thousands of people over the years, but more in the last couple of years. I mean, it just, I wouldn't even be able to count. And that gives you potential. Right? I mean, this is how amazing it is that someone can come and book a session with you, and you're across the globe, and you can literally give them, answers that they've been pursuing for their whole life, or they've been in lack of, and they don't understand what it is they're experiencing. And you can literally reset them, bring that resonance to that very moment, and people freak out. They're like, how is that possible? I mean, there's the one of hypnosis. Well, I want to quit smoking. I want to stop drinking. I don't want to take drugs. A lot of people tend to go, well, there's only one or two of those things that are possible, and then there's a limitation of the free will and blah, blah, blah. I've never seen that limitation by anybody. Once it's gone, it's gone.
Yeah. And I think what you will use different words to me, but we're talking about freedom. We're talking about helping people to become free. And so many people are trapped and prisoners of conditioning and cultures and what's going on in here, etc., etc. And therapy sets you free. Good therapy sets you free. Now that's my path to help people to that freedom. Your system is a different system to mine, but it's still the aim, the goal is to help people to be free, to live their lives freely. And as a result of living the lives freely, to be in joy as well, to have far more joy, because very few people live with very, very much joy in their life.
And I mean, that's it. It's about that realization, returning to the present moment. That means that you have the ability to do anything, do nothing.
But what I'm finding with, as I said earlier, with quite a lot of clients nowadays, I mean, I don't sort of preach non-duality. That's not my path. I'm there as a therapist to help people to get better. However, often when clients have done quite a bit of work and they've let go of a lot of baggage and they're feeling healthier and clearer and lighter, they naturally start to think more spiritually. It's really a wonderful process. I should charge more for this, I think, but it just naturally happens. People just become more spiritual. And then it's amazing how their language, how they start to understand that I mean, what were the Zen verses of Zosan? I think, there's no good, there's no bad, there's no right, there's no wrong, there just is. And when people are able to let go of the baggage and they're able to see things more clearly, they start to understand that everything just is. And of course, as we know, when people live with that mindset, you could call it, and with that way of being in the moment, that everything just is and every judgment is nonsense, is not necessary, they start to live more peacefully. They just start to, because they get, it's like a relief from the drama of all the nonsense of the world. And that for me, again, is a form of freedom, not just freeing the client from their phobia or their depression or their anxiety state or their physical illness or whatever it is that we're working on in therapy. They so often become more spiritual and become free. And just as a side, an adjunct to that is when we do a lot of past life regression. And with past life regression, most of the work is going through deaths in previous lives. So a lot of issues in this life are caused by traumatic deaths in past lives. So again, we see a lot of kinesthetic responses with clients dying or being hung or, shaking. I had a client a couple of years ago who in a past life was a young woman who got caught for stealing. So they chopped her hands off and then they hung her. So of course, we released all that energy. And as a result of that, then she just became freer in herself and lighter. So what I'm saying is that the deaths in past lives, release those. And what often happens in this present life as a natural byproduct, which again, I don't charge any extra for, is that a person tends to lose the fear of dying because they realize that we're eternal and therefore why worry about dying? So that's magical as well. That's really magical because that fear underpins so many of people's existences.
Yeah, it's like a discovery. You don't want to be Steve Jobs. Oh, it's much brighter than I thought. I mean, that's an interesting example. I don't know. I've had my own journey there, but furthermore, just sort of like understanding, that freedom can be realized now. So your ability to realize that, the potential is limitless, abundant, timeless, endless, limitless, infinite, is the mastery that I always refer back to, because everything is still energetic potential. I always tell people, okay, well, what does that mean? Well, your whole life existed with three things. It's a thought, feeling, and an emotion. That's it. That's the secret source to your reality. And how you are now commandeering your attention with that is to be determined by the seeker. Because the seeker, a Taoist seeker's journey is to be the Taoist knower, it will continue. And once you access that, that's the effortless action, the effortless effort that we speak of within Taoism, the Wu Ji, is that mother, that state, perfection manifest. And so when you're able to access that, you do crazy things. Like, for many years, I pursued that, teaching the alchemy. It's always exciting to witness people do supernatural things like levitate and, physical healing, instant healing, altering things from a spectrum of psychokinesis, telekinesis. I mean, it just goes on. All the clair senses are robust and developed and for you to use. But once you obtain them, generally speaking, because you're subject to the energetic potential, the electromagnetic potential of this realm, it has a charge and then it diminishes. So your desire is still looking for the mother. So all this stuff, a coffee cup, our conversation, a cell phone, it all has this energetic potential that once it's met, you meet that resonance, you're like, oh, that's great. Oh, now I want more, because it's not bringing you back to the truth, the present moment, the return. It has the distortion, as a dear friend of mine, Martin, the Buddhist monk, would say, the dukkha is the distortion of this, what someone would perceive as three-dimensional reality, right? It's a distortion. It's being distorted by your attention intention, and that is the fundamental dismay and distraction of a human being, and returning. Everyone has their own version as to why are we here. What an interesting word from a linguistic perspective to put someone in a rat in a wheel for the rest of eternity. Why? As you understand how powerful that word is and what that can do for potential or complete confusion, just the simplicity of that. And so, that journey can be, once mastered, it just, for me as a Taoist teacher, it's to remember and then return to that perfection, which raises the collective resonance of humanity. So for a purpose, the purpose of the human experience is to remember and realize the selflessness that comes from servitude. And people are like, what? No, Jifu, I want to levitate. I want to burn things with my hands. I want to read people's minds. I'm like, that's all awesome. I'm going to teach you all that stuff. That's exciting. But now let's get down to, once you achieve these goals, it's like playing a video game. You get to that level, now you want to go to the next one. And actually it loses it becomes lackluster. It no longer is alluring to you. You've now achieved and absorbed that resonance and realize, holy moly, the resonance is way high. For me to continue to expand, it continues. It doesn't stop there. I haven't, I've come across maybe 3 or 4 people in my lifetime around the world, and I've trained a lot of people. I've experienced many different metaphysical, paranormal, supernatural experiences. I've only come across 3 people that can levitate. 2 of them were people that had trained in Kundalini practices for better part of 20 years. One was one of my students that I taught that practice. He never excited me. I'm a very robust and husky guy. I weigh about 270 pounds. It doesn't enter my mind that I'm interested in wanting to levitate. Is it possible? I know it is. Do I have the roadmap to teach you? Sure. Yeah. But for me, what gets me warm and fuzzy inside is watching someone return to their truth. I want to see a physical, mental, emotional, spiritual healing. That gets me warm and fuzzy. And that's why I continue to repeat the same experience every day. Like Oliver Twist, I want more. You want more, boy? Yes, sir, I have another. Yeah, absolutely. I want it. Keep bringing it, and you will repeat it. It's like that expansive joy, that gushing of complete bliss that both of us receive right now is that self-evidence. And it's like, okay, well, Jeffrey, how do you see that? Well, I get to see the auric potential, the energetic potential. And then if I sample it, I want to, or whatever you want. But this is from a sort of like a psychologist perspective, what we call the psychodynamic loop that we obtain through this embodiment.
Okay. And just as I mentioned, but funny enough, you mentioned Dickens, and Dickens actually played with mesmerism, which was the early form of hypnosis. So,
you can't make this stuff up. I mean, Mesmer was such an interesting character, but I mean, if you start regressing back to how far just the state of awareness goes, well, it goes into practices from across the globe, across human history, that for a Taoist, these type of states of awareness to enter the Wu Ji has been around for hundreds of thousands of years. And people are like, hang on a second, that's ridiculous. I actually had a historian on this channel many months ago who's researched the origins of humanity, and it goes back on paper, if you go looking, at least 1 million years. So let's stop with all the nonsense about, oh, it's only 6,000, 5,000, 2,000, 1,000. What do you know? What do you know?
Yeah. So, but also we're talking about freedom. And that for me is the bottom line, is freeing people up on their journey, on their metaphysical journey. And also, the potential for future life work as well, for changing future lives by changing now what is going on in their life now. So if there is this, I mean, the simple idea of the subconscious is that it's this sort of repository of everything that has ever happened and ever been and ever will be for you. And the Freudian concept of the conscious and subconscious is the mental iceberg. So the tip of the iceberg is the thinking mind, the conscious mind, but beneath the surface of the waves is the subconscious. And this is like 0.0001% or something like that. This is 99.99%. Some recent mind researchers, I don't know how they came up with these figures, but they state that the conscious mind takes on board 50 bits of information every second. The subconscious takes on board 11 million bits of information every second. So this is so much powerful. So when you're able to work with this inner state, with the most powerful part, the subconscious, then the changes can happen very, very quickly. And of course, just being in a meditative state is going into the subconscious. Just being in the now moment is going into awareness, which is for me part of is a subconscious experience. So the more we do these things, as you say, the more easy they become.
You just fall into that resonance.
Yeah. And the more you do it, the longer it stays. And so what I'm saying is the more stable it becomes. You can hold on to that state of awareness for longer periods of time without reacting. But that for me is the beauty of therapy. But as I say, for me, a lot of this work is not just about healing now. It's about creating a person who is letting go of emotional baggage, who is coming into awareness, so that future lifetimes they don't have to take all this crap with them, and they're therefore going to be in much better, higher states, I don't know, when they're in a future life.
Yeah, I agree with you wholeheartedly. It's acquiring and developing an awareness that makes it repeatable, so that you're not having delusions of grandeur. You're not having psychotic states that are not stable, as you put it. They're fortified and they're repeatable, and their energetic potential is realized, so that then you can validate it for yourself. It's about self-realization. I parallel a Taoist path to a Gnostic path of realization. That know thyself, but to know thyself is to know nothing, as the Jade Emperor would say. When you accept you know nothing, you know everything. That juxtaposed head screw that people like, well, Taoism is kind of full of that. It's like, what's the first verse of Taoism, which really we call it an incantation, which is a part of the magical register of the Tao Te Ching, the Tao Te Ching. I just actually transcribed the 2024 version with Lao Tzu, my teacher. I just published that, which is basically, each verse is an incantation. You go on a magical mystery ride that has 81 levels of consciousness that you acquire within each verse, plus a frequency, a color, and a shape that you embody from that. So it's straight full on, like Lucy in the sky with diamonds. And that's exactly what you want. You want this experience. But I always tell people, it's like, oh, I take DMT and, I'm a psychonaut and I do this and that. I think, oh, well, that's great. You're here for a reason. Yes, because it lasted a second and you want it. It's not repeatable unless you get your fix from your local drug dealer or whatever. You're not going to acquire it, and it's not going to maintain, as Steve put it, a resonance. You can't hold that line because it's just an entry. And I think it's fantastic. It gives you a taste. It gives you a realization there's something more. And then it's now time for you I can teach you how to cultivate a DMT experience that lasts 3 days, or maybe the rest of your life if you choose to. I mean, someone would literally probably go insane if they were to look through my eyes. My eyes right now see colors, aura, information, energetic potential, and I create the guardrails of that perception because of my own mastery, my own ability of developing these clear senses. But someone would probably think they're having an episode, they're going to have a stroke or something. And that's generally part of the physical traits of transformation and resonance is they have this physical sort of like experience that could potentially be, WebMD's greatest hits, where in actuality, you're having a transformation that is a visceral kinesthetic thing that is literally unraveling, as you would put it, releasing the trauma, and you're able to create a larger channel for this present moment.
Yeah.
And a lot of people have that. Have you noticed that yourself through your own teachings?
Well, I think I'm just thinking about around that in a slightly different way, in that I think a lot of people are restricted from thinking in these terms because we've been brought up to believe that the only way to achieve something higher is through a priest or through a religion. And it's as though, well, I'll pray to them or I'll ask them and they will do it for me. And that conditioning is still very strong in the world, especially in the Western world. And so that has to be sort of got over as well. I mean, in a way, even I become a bit of a priest because, I mean, my clients, as you say, could do a lot of this themselves, but I have to be the middleman to help them.
Well, yeah. I mean, there's nothing. I mean, it would be your self-doubt realizing the knowing. You're the vessel. You're the transmitter of this frequency, the resonance.
Yeah.
And, it's like the humility. Who needs humility? I mean, that's a man-made distraction of all things human condition. Whereas you're here as that vessel, and you're changing people's perception of their reality and returning to who they are. It doesn't. I always tell people the universe doesn't have a moral compass yet. This is how we kind of like transmute it into that. Then we go down the karmic path, and holy moly, I mean, Taoist magic is literally constructed on the karmic model of the seeker's understanding. So that means that if you are really deep into duality, oh my goodness, you are going to be extremely susceptible to the magic and the process and what is imprinted into that different layered energetic potential. If you do not, then in most, if not all cases I've ever witnessed, it has no potential. But then you can instantly manifest anything with that understanding.
Yeah. So I just keep going back to the bottom line is helping people to get free. And it's as simple as that. And however we do that, it means taking them out of the conditioned model that they're helpless or they need somebody else to help them or they need a drug to do it or whatever, to bring them to that awareness that they are powerful. We're all sovereign beings. And by helping people to come to that awareness, it means that they become free. And then the potential is limitless. Absolutely.
Yeah. I think that there's definitely this. Being a priest, I might be a little biased. I'm a Taoist priest, but I can teach you Taoist philosophy, Taoist metaphysical realization, Taoist religion. But the truth is there's this spiritual war going on, where there is a what you would call the some type of ominous frequency, energy that is definitely commandeering people's attention, intention, and that comes from their ability to buy into that. And so if the fear is up, then there's a lot to sell.
Yeah.
And so with that, then that energetic potential is, created. So now what is potential? Well, a classic example of that would be the spiritual Karen, or a psychic vampire, as the society would put it, where you are literally feeling the effects of your in lack of by being in the presence of someone that might be considered needy, in a state of victimhood, very much, deficient and wanting you to make them whole by constantly reaching for you on an energetic potential level. And you literally feel exhausted. You're like, oh, I'm exhausted just hanging around that person. I don't like it. I don't like them. Now that's a part of you returning and realizing that it has nothing to do with them. It has everything to do with you. Yet, this is part of finding someone like yourself to help that realize.
Yeah. And the beautiful thing is, and I'm sure you've seen as well over the last, for me, the last 15, 20 years have been extraordinary. The way that things have changed, the way that the awakening is happening. People are starting to understand more. People are looking for therapy. They're looking for, spiritual processes, which they wouldn't have probably looked at 40, 50 years ago. And it's easy for people to get into them. And there's a great awakening going on. And so I think that again feeds into the collective, as you say, our energy fields change. And so therefore that changes what's going on outside in the collective. And it's just remarkable how this is happening. I can't believe it. I feel like I'm 108 years old, and I'm not, but I feel like that sometimes. But the remarkable changes in the last 15, 20 years, I'm quite shocked by, and that's wonderful because it means people are starting to wake up. And it's been a long process, but people are waking up.
Yeah, there's definitely evidence of that. I mean, just from reading something like the Schumann resonance of the Earth, and the echoing effects of identifying as things as a macro of a micro, micro of a macro, hermetic principle of all things mental. I'm just using examples because that's kind of sexy right now. Atlantis, halls of Amente, Akashic records. These are all spiritual terminology that people today use to find insight to what I just call the Tao. And, that pure source information will be self-evident. It's either you're in or you're out, and you will be able to transmute that into this, what you perceive as this reality, and you'll have the effects of that will be shown to you mentally, emotionally, physically, spiritually. It will be evident, and it will be recognized by everyone around you, everyone experiencing that. And that's part of that reoccurring and repeatable experience that then makes you very clear on your path. And I think that spiritual path is the one that really gets distorted because people want to be separated. Guess what? You believe in something. I'm more concerned with someone that doesn't start with a belief system that ends with a knowing. You start with a belief system from, Lao Tzu, my teacher, always has 5 stages of awareness: concept, consciousness, knowing, unconscious knowing, and then being with all things. And from an alchemical process, we have a 9-stage development, which starts with the physical, energetic, and spiritual body, then the sun body, the earth body, the moon body, and finally the oneness body, the ultimate body, and then being with all things. As a progression, because you're initially subject to the basically a hetero action, which is what you start, you must finish. It's part of the human instinct. You got to get in. It's like, let me put my hand out. What are you going to do?
Do the same.
You're going to shake my hand because it's a part about bonding. It's also a part about control to a much deeper level that people don't even understand. So this is also a gateway and entry level into someone's unconscious quite quickly, using the tactile effects of that, and then the process of how you create the attention from that person you're interacting with. And within a few seconds, you can literally be commandeering the unconscious. And that can be for benefit or profit or to help or to not help. And I think that's where people get really deluded, because a lot of I find it interesting that within hypnosis specifically, a lot of the hypnotherapists, and maybe it's because they don't actually believe it, but I come across mentalists, magicians, illusionists. I love them. I'm like, you want to see this for real? Because I know you don't believe it. And they're like, yeah, well, it's an act. And then when I show them PK touch for real, and I'm not using the sleight of hand to somehow acquire this sensory response, they freak out because it's all energy. It's all energy. You can learn it. We all have the potential. No, I mean, this is the very issue that people have with commandeering. And I think, and I mean, you could say this because you're a hypnotherapist. Personally, I'm going to say this. there isn't a single person that can't be reset, bring back to the original state of perfection. With that said, if you are fearful or you are emotional, you're suggestible. So for someone that has a deeper understanding of what that means, it can be problematic, in my opinion. This is where you breed in this the born idea of the godfather of NLP, like Tony Robbins. You get these guys that are like, I'm learning this stuff because I want to help people. No, let's be honest. You're learning it because you want to manipulate people. There's one thing my personality can't stand is the very clear case of manipulation.
Yeah, I can't stand manipulation. It pisses me off no end.
Right.
Really
But you understand, I mean, in this game for this many decades, you understand that people clearly look for that. There's two seats, hypnosis and NLP, which have been shown to them. Maybe they got a little taste of it on YouTube or whatever, and they're like, man, I can control people. And I'm like, yeah, that's so like, it's tasteful and it's a shitty sort of state to be in. It's a low frequency, and I really don't like it.
Yeah. And, and it's all very egotistical as well. So that's another thing, with so many people just from in my profession become therapists from an egotistical perspective. They like that power thing in a way. And their ego will get in the way in therapy sessions. And so again, I teach my students, stay out of the way, let the client's subconscious do it. You're there as a facilitator to let the subconscious come through. It knows best. It's the all-knowing, all-wise part of a person. So why get in the way with your ego? If you can ask the subconscious what it needs to do, it will usually do it. And for me, some of the best therapists, advocates, practitioners are doing that all the time. Whereas, I mean, NLP is classic in my opinion. I mean, I trained in NLP and I use NLP techniques, but it's classic. It seems to have a higher percentage of egotists involved and manipulators than most of the therapies. And, this is the thing. So, it's about getting the ego out of the way and just letting the client get better, which is hard to do because, again, we're all coming at it from our own conditioning and our own emotional baggage. And, if we're carrying a lot of baggage and we react to that in different ways. So somebody's way of being an egotist is they're just reacting to their emotional pain. But yeah, it's about just getting the ego out of the way as much as possible. And, that again is a spiritual state. From my perspective, there's too many people are in the ego, and therefore they're not in the now, they're not in the moment, they're not in oneness. And the idea that everything is separate. No, it isn't. We're all connected. Everything's connected. And again, that comes through in therapy with clients who are healing. They start to become more compassionate to other people. And sometimes there are techniques we use, we call them reframes, which is where the client will see something from a different perspective. And that blows the socks off often. And then you suddenly realize, wow, so I've been doing this all of my life because of this, but now I understand I don't have to do that anymore. I mean, the classic simple reframe is somebody who's healing childhood wounds, and they suddenly realize that their father that's been horrible to them all their life and beating them up, or an alcoholic and violent or whatever, the father is only responding to his inner childhood pain, and he's just a child in himself. So when the client sees that reframe is so simple, it's like, well, no wonder he was like he was. His father beat shit out of him day after day. So people then become more understanding, more compassionate, and that compassion goes out into the world. So this is always a spiritual process without it being overtly spiritual. And there's real beauty in that and simplicity in that. And we don't have to do very much in order to become a bit more compassionate.
It's reunited and it feels so good. Especially with empathy.
Yeah.
Which is where so many people are detached from that. And That's how I teach the human journey within this planet, on this planet Earth, is remembering, and that selflessness is part of the servitude.
Yes.
And I mean, many people have different versions, but it seems to be a more consistent theme of people getting a higher state of awareness, that part of the journey of a human being is to remember, and then to raise humanity's collective consciousness or spiritual consciousness. And then that empathy is like the critical. Where there are people that are removed, they are completely removed, and that's the 1%ers, where you're like, how do you find a serial killer, a pedophile, some madman? Well, there you go. These are people that have lost their way. And, in most cases, the megalomaniacs through human history, the only reason their empires fall is they stop believing their own bullshit. And then that's when they get reunited. All of a sudden, they get reunited, and then they fall subject to their own emotional conditioning that then makes them prey to just the unraveling, which a great example would be psychos like Hitler, Mao. I mean, people don't even understand that part of the reasons why Taoism is not more embraced or even known of, as opposed to Buddhism, is because people like Mao erased this literally 60 million of Chinese citizens off the face of the earth, genocide beyond anything that other people have heard of in human history, and with a no problem. And so, it's like people have this, resistance, and they look at, the Chinese culture as being, a bunch of, haters to the rest of the world. But that's the megalomaniacs that are running the country. The people are beautiful. And this is part of them returning, and eventually they will return and be given back their own power. Because the kind of energy can't last.
Of course, and it's about overcoming divisiveness. All the time we are divided. We're taught divisiveness. We live in divided societies. I mean, look at the American political scene, which is completely about divisiveness, and people then just keep that sort of, it's like a pattern, it's like a habit pattern that they just take into everyday life, because it becomes normal, because the propaganda is that we're better than they are, or that's worse than we do and stuff. And it's all divisive. And, bringing people back to that just essential truth that we're all one. And that's as simple as that. And it's easy to forget because the propaganda is out there all the time. But, that again is why therapy, is why spirituality is so important. It's bringing people back to this essential truth that we are free in essence, and we can find that freedom, and we can stay within that freedom. But of course, the powers that be don't want us to experience that freedom. It's not in their interests. They need to control us. They don't want us to step outside the box. They don't want us to step outside, as you say, the hamster wheel. They want us in that hamster wheel. The beautiful thing is being in oneness is like a quiet revolution. We're doing it from the inside out, and they can't stop us, and they don't know we're doing it. So again, therapy, any good therapy, any spiritual practice which sets people free, is changing what's going on in the collective, changing what's going on in the world, and creating a better world for all of us. So it's that doing something in a micro way to change what's going on at a macro level. And I just think that's so important. And there's beauty in that. And it's awesome.
It is. It's like this selflessness you're not having to ponder or put thought to. It just is. It's our moment. And that you really know when you're in the flow, because you're not attempting to manipulate or gain something from the transaction, which is an interaction for many people that they believe is just, I'm just helping my fellow man. No, you're looking for a result. That's okay. That's okay. But you gravitate to the default, which is the selflessness. And the more and more you increase your resonance, there's less need to attempt to decipher what it is. It just becomes this present moment. You don't have to think about it. You're just there. You're not having to go, oh, am I angry today? Is that person upsetting me? Is this the reason why mommy never loved me? All that stuff falls away as your resonance continues to get higher from being given these building blocks. As you said, the therapy, the regression work, all the things that you offer the world, Steve, is just amazing to help people remember. That to me is the very essence of this conversation. The whole purpose I moved into podcasting is to have conversations with incredible beings like yourself, to raise that conscious collective so that someone comes in and listens to this, whether it's on YouTube or on a podcast, and they go, that's the answer that I was looking. Oh my goodness, my mind is blown. From this conversation.
I get that. And that's the beauty of the internet. I mean, I did an interview in Oslo last year with a lady who's running an online spiritual group, Wisdom from the North. It's had nearly 250,000 views in less than a year, which is extraordinary. I just keep falling over when I realize that 250,000 views, that is amazing.
How was the conversation?
It was lovely. It was great. Really beautiful. She's a beautiful lady. The lady that runs the organization, her name is Yannicka. Beautiful soul, very altruistic, completely authentic, and totally honest. And it was a great conversation. And I think I struck a chord with sharing a lot of my past life regression stories and how it helps people to grow. And it's just been remarkable how that's gone viral, I think the phrase is, isn't it? So, one of the nice things for me, what I like to do, as I said earlier, when clients are coming through the process of releasing the stuff and they're starting to heal and they're becoming more aware, and as I said, often the conversations become non-dual conversations, non-dual awarenesses. And I usually then point them in the direction, because my Buddhist background sort of moves into Zen more than anything else. It's about, okay, look at because I know Zen and Taoism are sort of sisters in a way, in some ways. But I sort of get them to look at Zen as much as anything else, because Zen is just about being in the now. And I often get them to look at the verses, the Zen verses of Zozan, because they sort of, at first sight, when you look at them from a dualistic perspective, they don't make sense. But once you understand the way, and as you say, the flow, and everything is about being non-judgmental and just being in the now, all the verses make sense, and people suddenly become transformed by that. And it's almost like what the phrase is, a poem begins in mystery and ends in delight. And I think non-duality and also the Zen verses of Sosan do that very much. They begin in mystery because initially it doesn't make sense. But once you've got that understanding of oneness, even a small understanding as I have, nowhere near, I'm sure, as big as your understanding is, because you're involved in it day to day in a much bigger way. But even when a person has that understanding, it starts to change things for them. And I like to point my clients to Rupert Spira, because a lot of his stuff is on YouTube. And his great phrase that I think he got from one of his Indian teachers was, am I aware? That's it. Just ask yourself, am I aware? Because most of the time we're not aware. Most of the time we're all over the place. And just those simple words, am I aware? You stop and you come into awareness. Now I'm aware. And it's as simple as that, and people don't realize. But like I said, if there's a lot going on in here, then it is hard to remain stable with that awareness. So for me, ultimately, the therapy releases, it calms the system down, it helps people to be more balanced, to be more centered, and then they can start living a more spiritual life.
Amen to that, brother.
Hallelujah.
Yeah, hallelujah. I love it. I mean, out here in Vegas, I have my temple and on my property here. It's 2,000 square foot Taoist temple, probably the biggest private temple in America.
Okay.
And I've got a lot of, it's pretty crazy out here. But, I surround myself, behind me, there's Jehovah Witness, there's, Mormons, Christians, Catholics, believing in something is the food to knowing. And so I really believe the onslaught of this scientific language, this new age language that's a couple of 100 years old, can be advantageous, and then it also can be really separating you from knowing who you are. And it's always good to start with something. And however that comes in what form, it's perfect for you. And it doesn't matter. I always tell people, if you dismiss someone else's belief system, you dismiss your own. There's a million ways up the mountain. There is no right or wrong way. There just is. And when that becomes validated through your own experiential moment, the now. There's anything is possible, but it has to be verified and validated by you. And this is where in your head, it just can go on for a lifetime or many lifetimes. I mean, I have students that travel the world, go to a dozen Taoist temples, all native Chinese. And, I've been a Taoist probably 1,000 times, 1,000 lives, right? So I've come in all different forms, from just a practitioner to a priest to an immortal. I've experienced all of those things. And quite frankly, if you really understand the now moment, you've experienced everything. You are the true essence of Taoism is to realize everything is a bellows. That means that everything is contracting and expanding at the same time. You're all things and nothing at the same time.
Okay.
And people are like, whoa. Now, the center point of that, the Vesika, the center point is the breath, between the breath in and the breath out. And you enter that, it's like Luke Skywalker flying towards the Death Star. At one point, bam, you want to hit it. You want to hit right on it, and then you expand that resonance. And as we've talked about before, the more and more you get a taste of that spiritual dragon, the more and more you're able to cultivate that, you can repeat it. And you repeat it. And then that state, that flow state, the Wu Wei, it's just, it's, people always ask me, so how are you doing today? I'm like, it's good to be me. It just is. It's good to be me, because I am literally living the manifestation of my reality, doing things, living in servitude, enjoying the incredible gift of my 6 children and my wife. And, this is what this journey for me is. That's it, beginning and end. And the more people I can help them, bring them back to that truth, their absolute truth. Not when someone goes, the absolute truth is this. This is the fundamentals of this. About face and run in the other direction. I mean, these are all tools that Steve and I are giving you, are tools to acquire your own knowing of what that is. And so, it starts with something. A lot of people go, well, you don't need this, you don't need that, just surrender, be one with all things. Well, okay, that's great, dude. But there's a reason why people are standing here or listening to this conversation, because they're already created a curiosity, which is in the form of seeking more of an understanding of who they are and what is the experience they're having. And that's the whole journey they've started on. And of course, it starts with the head. It starts with the potential, veil being removed. And you're like, oh, well, I want that back. Whatever that is. That's the starting point.
And also it goes back a long way, because we've lived many lives. So, of course, we now are a composite of this life and previous lifetimes. And so, therefore, that's all within us as well. So we are a manifestation, not just of this life, but of everything that's gone before. And as a result of that that confuses things as well, because if there's so much confusion there with previous lives where I was this, and when I was that, when I was something else. So often clearing that away, from my perspective as a regression therapist, clearing those lives out means that the energy from them is not affecting anybody now. It's actually not influencing them now.
The identity.
Yeah.
Part of, the belief system.
Which becomes the ego.
To the knowing, right?
Yes. Which becomes the ego, which means I am, and it's all me, me, me. So, clear that, let go of those past lives, work through them, release their effects, and they no longer influence you.
Yeah. I mean, I think people love to have these moments where they just go from one extreme. I literally spent my teenage years from the age of 10 to, late teens, obsessed with bodybuilding and powerlifting. So I went from that, and then I had this voice in my head saying, find meditation. Now, in those days, that was Hare Krishnas and Yellow Submarine and, stuff that was just so obscurely weird. It's like, what in Tao's name is meditation? Or that stillness thing. You've seen someone in that weird position. They're sitting down and they're doing this. I'm like, that doesn't work for me. But the voice was like, you got to find it. You got to find it. And like my physical body was like the hubcaps were coming off the wheels, because I was like getting really strong. I was over 300 pounds, deadlifting 800 pounds, squatting 800 pounds, bench pressing. It was stupid. And I could feel that the container was not being able to maintain this. It was like, something's going to blow. And so the voice is like, go find meditation. I'm like, look, that doesn't work. I pick things up, I crush them, I toss them. That to me is like, that's for some weird Hare Krishna guy, or someone that looks like they're completely deluded. They're off in the la la land. And I'm like, oh, well, let me see what I can find. And I found a free meditation class, and I was like, I don't know what that is. In my mind, the Hollywood version is to be still. And I still didn't even know what that was. It was like, what does still mean? I don't know. I don't know. I don't know what still is. Yet I sat down, I got to this thing, and this woman was some Qigong grandmaster, little 50-pound nothing. I looked at her and went, oh, this is going to be painful. And I got there, and it was in some ghetto, some youth center in a ghetto, literally, because I'm a beggar. It's free. I found this thing, turned up there. I'm screaming, and there's screaming and yelling, dogs barking, ambulances, everything going on outside this rec center, thinking, I'm not going to make it back to my car. I probably am going to be stabbed and killed on the way back, right? So I get in there, and I sit down, and everyone's, I look around the room, and I'm just one of the oddball half a dozen beggars, and I'm trying to contort myself into the lotus position, getting back pains, literally. I can't do it. It's like the Hollywood movies do this. I can't do that. I'm a big gorilla. So I'm contorted, and I'm listening to this nonsense outside. I'm looking around the room going, really? How the hell did I end up here? And the woman's like, it literally happened in a second, Steve. And this is how quite fast I remembered. And it has a lot to do with my immortality and then what I'm a reincarnation of and all that kind of good stuff, blah, blah, blah. But I literally, she literally stood there. Well, she was kind of standing, but really she was actually even standing. I was still taller than her sitting down. But anyway, I looked at her, and I'm listening to this stuff, and I'm looking around, my back's aching, and I'm like, this is not going to work. And she goes, now, listen to my voice, and now let everything fall away. And the second that word away happened, it was like this. I was looking at her, my eyes were still open, and she was going, and there was complete silence. Everything disappeared. And I went, oh, holy shit. This is unbelievable. This is the most powerful thing that I have ever been able to witness or obtain or whatever it is. I have no idea what it is, but I want it. I want more of it. And I literally probably spent a minute or two with complete silence. And it was like, that was my entry to meditation. I went, thank you, sir. May I have another? I'll have whatever she's having. And, that was just instantly remembering. Now,
you see, I would say that's trance. I would say
Oh yeah,
you went into
yeah.
trance. That is
I
a
went right
classic trance
into it.
experience, isn't it?
Waited, wide eyes wide open, straight
Mm,
into a state of awareness
yeah,
that gave me basically. I was the maestro.
yeah,
I
yeah,
had
yeah,
that
yeah.
complete access. And
Wonderful.
what was funny was in retrospect, it was like I was doing that all the time. I'd walk in and go, I'm lifting 500 pounds for 20 reps in a squat. I
Mm.
just walk in and go, shoo, 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 and get off. And like
Yeah.
that's the state that is a mastery. And
Mm.
so when you get into that state, and then that 3 days later, I took a channeling class. I blew out Lao Tzu. Lao Tzu came straight into my physical body. The teacher that I had 60 years in the game as a spiritual channeling teacher, and he was pissed. He was like, you big overgrown gorilla, walk into my class. I've been doing this 60 years, and you
Yeah.
blow the roof off it and bring Lao Tzu into this space. And no joke, he was so
Yeah.
derailed from that. I had him in my arms 6 months later, and he died from brain cancer.
Really.
It set him on a whirlwind that he was just like, well, I've been waiting. I've been
Yeah.
patiently waiting. I've been teaching. I've been doing all these things for all these people.
Mm.
Where's mine? He literally, all of a sudden, everything unraveled for him. And,
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
like, and then 2 days after that, I witnessed my first physical healing where I saw gangrenous flesh go back to pink in color in 40 minutes. And I
Really.
was like, just insanity.
Yeah. Yeah.
And like, where do you go from that? You go, okay, we just started. And so for me, for the last 30 years, that's what I witness on a daily basis
Yeah.
is what people consider miracles.
Yeah.
And so, I always remind people you can instantly obtain this awareness of the now moment. How do I know this? I talk from experience. It happened to me. Now,
Yeah.
I use these methods to help people find their way to the same state.
Yeah.
And some people may be at a certain level or on their journey, they're at this path and they need to go here, or they're behind or they're ahead. It doesn't matter.
No.
You just have begun your journey from a seeker to a knower. And that's all that is. That's everything.
Well, and look at it from my perspective. My language is past life language, and therefore, living over many lifetimes. And we're saying about earlier about people being Catholics or Jews or whatever, Christians or Buddhists. They're all becoming seekers in their own way, but it may be that it takes many lifetimes until they actually can come to a place where they are ready to become the knower. And thinking about it from my perspective, you have probably had, as you say, many lives where you've been on this path and you've achieved many things in those lifetimes spiritually. So it's almost like it all coalesces in this present lifetime and brings you to where you are. And so we are all on this path. We're all on a journey at different stages. And you said, never dismiss anybody else's belief system or spiritual path, because by doing that, you're dismissing your own. We are all on a journey. We're all on a continuum. We're all on a spectrum in some way of moving from darkness to light. And, there are many people at an early stage on that journey and others who are further on. And that's just the way of it.
Perfect.
But,
It's perfection.
mm,
It is. Wherever you are right now is perfection.
yes. Yeah. Yeah. And it's a great reminder that, I mean, one of my friends in Ireland, a beautiful hypnotherapist colleague, all the time, she just reminds me, everything is perfect. Everything is perfect. You've just got to keep coming back to that.
That's it. That's all you need. That's all you need.
It's easy to forget.
And that's where I always stress the energetic potential, because then it can be realized by you. And, because people just say, oh, yeah, you just got to come back. Everything's perfect. Yeah, blah, 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 blah. That means nothing to me. I need to see it.
Yeah.
I need to experience it.
Okay.
Because this is 3D reality. This is a material world. So to alter that material world, you must have evidence for you to return. And that's the only reason why the alchemy is so, in my opinion, the most important thing for the seeker is that validation. And then, Once you'll okay, the resonance now, next, and just be.
Yes.
That will materialize in this present moment. It will be realized as a manifestation, magic, healing. However you receive it, you will know.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, this has been an amazing conversation, my dear friend.
Okay, good. Thank you. It's been lovely being with you. I enjoyed listening to you, and it's lovely from my perspective to hear a different, what can we say, different terminology, you know, in the way that you're viewing things and your approach and the way you come through to things from mine. But I've learned a lot from you. Thank you, San Qing.
Yeah, and me too. It's like we always remind ourselves as a Taoist seeker to the knowing. The student is the teacher is the student. When you lose sight of that, then everything returns not to perfection, but the mundane existence that is this material, humanistic expression. And so it's always about an expansion. That bellows effect, the contracting and expanding, that you are all things and nothing at the same time, is your ability to go, okay, well, let's just take all this away. Well, what does it mean, Jifu? Well, it means basically, is your glass half empty or full? It's like, that's it. That's it. It's like, how do you perceive your reality? And if it's half full, guess what? It'll continually be full.
Yes.
And it's part of that gravitational realization of that energetic potential. You want more, then you'll have more. You want less, you'll have less. That's that polarizing effect of this realm.
Yes.
And part of realizing that mirroring effect is how powerful that becomes. Now, if I was going to play with hypnosis, I would separate conscious from unconscious and move my little hands and create some metaphors, and poof, you would just be in another world. But I'm not doing that at all. So we're just moving around. It's funny how people talk with their hands and they don't realize how powerful that is as a attention-seeking tool for the receiver. That's part of the layered effects of all the things we're talking about. Everything has potential.
Yeah.
You know? But again, thank you, my dear friend. I will ask in closing, I'm going to put all your social media, everything under this podcast. I want my students, my disciples, my 126ers, my subscribers to go out and explore Steve's material, his books, his offerings, his classes, his therapy sessions. I imagine you're virtual, so you can reach any part of the world. And furthermore, I want to ask you one last question. What is your definition of spiritual consciousness?
Gosh. Should have asked me this 3 weeks ago. I'd have had a chance to think about it for 3 weeks.
You're not thinking, you're knowing, my dear friend. Come on.
Yeah. I think it's just going into awareness, becoming aware, coming into the now. That for me is spiritual consciousness.
I love it. I love it. In hundreds of podcasts, I've never heard the same answer, as it should be.
I can imagine. Yeah.
It's so individual, but so much the same, because it always returns. It always returns.
Good point.
Well, thank you, my dear friend. I'm really grateful that you spent time with me today in this conversation.
Thank you. It's been a real pleasure, San Qing, and I appreciate you asking me, and thank you. And, we may see each other in the future.
Yes.
Who knows?
Absolutely. I always love to, collaborate with incredible beings like yourself. So, there's always potential for many different things. I have a retreat center out here, normally bus in 60 people in person or virtual, depends. You might be coming over the pond, head on over to the USA, mate.
Funnily enough, I'm now experiencing a wonderful new relationship with a beautiful lady in Florida. And I'm coming over to Florida at the end of the year. I'm giving my one-man show in San Diego called The Power of Past Life Regression. That's in San Diego on the 8th of November, I think it is. And it's a free talk. So if anybody is in the San Diego area, then have a look me up, and be nice to see you. So
You might have to ping up here, copper, you know?
Nice. Yeah.
Hey, look at me. I'm getting into my weird Australian, South African English. I will do you muppet. You know, if you don't get that done.
You start sounding like Dick Van Dyke in Mary Poppins.
Yeah, right. Well, I definitely offer and suggest the audience to go and check out Steve, and we will continue our bonding and remembrance of our friendship and reuniting that, and potentially you might consider an offer to come out this way for a workshop or something else that may not be virtual. Enhancing your love interests, you might have to pop all over to Nevada a little bit, which is not that far from San Diego, to be honest.
Okay.
It's a hop, jump, and a skip.
Okay.
In that, I want to thank you, my dear friend, for sharing your time today. It's my pleasure. I want to thank the universe for bringing you into my life. I want to thank the audience for sharing their time with us today. And I am your humble servant and seafood Taoist Master San Qing, and I'll see you on the next one, guys.